So I'm one of these weirdos that likes to do all of the things. And when I say all of the things, it's really meant to be all of the things. It's rare that an opportunity comes across my desk that I'm not at least thinking about, yes, I want to do that. Usually, if I have to say no to something, it's with a lot of reservations, and it's never a hard no, or at least it's rarely a hard no. It's usually a yes and, like a yes, I will do it, and here's somebody who can kind of work as my proxy kind of thing. So this is basically a story about how I try to manage all of these different responsibilities in my work. In my imagination, kind of the picture I have of myself in my head, I am a very organized person. So when I imagine who I am and I kind of have that mental picture, I think of myself as a very organized person. Now, if you know me, you may be thinking something very, very different here, and that's okay. I think levels of organization between how people imagine themselves and how they're actually perceived might differ. There might be a pretty big gap there. And I think that a lot of people who get to work with me kind of see the ways in which that I organize myself. And while they may not agree that I'm a, kind of quote unquote organized person, they may see that there are aspects of my work that I try to make sure have really clear-cut structures. Now, I think as kids, we often have just unstructured time. And I remember summer vacations when my time was so unstructured that I would get up whenever I felt like it. And I would play video games until I got hungry, and I would eat some meal that was there just to, kind of fill me up, and then play video games until nighttime. And that was my day to day. It was super kind of just whatever I wanted it to be, and there was so much space in my schedule to just do anything. And then, of course, as I grew up and I learned about how to structure my time, and I went to school and I went to work, I started learning about how to manage my time. And one of the things that I learned really early on, and this is something my mom taught me, was to create time blocks. And this is basically the premise of writing, an hour, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and putting a task or putting something that you want to do during that hour. And you just block out the time throughout the day. If you're going to work an 8-hour day, you block out those 8 hours. Or if you're going to work for 3 hours straight, you block out those 3 hours. And that was an early lesson in kind of how to structure my time and learn how to better utilize the time that I had. Now, I still do this, so the time that I have, I believe, is fairly well organized. If you look at my calendar, things are just really kind of blocked out. But I think for most of the people who've been to my office and who have seen kind of my desk space, they would argue that maybe I'm not the most organized person. And that's because the surface of my desk is usually just littered with stuff. And this could be everything from, electronic gadgets that I've, halfway been working with. It could be papers. It's very likely a lot of different papers organized in kind of haphazard ways. And so people are always kind of not necessarily impressed, but they're very kind of concerned about my levels of organization. But the reality is that even though the surfaces of my desk are visibly unorganized, the stuff that I keep in my desk is usually very, very well organized. So I usually end up having file folders and things like that, or at least I used to whenever file folders were a thing, that were clearly labeled and kind of laid out in terms of how they're going to be organized and how the information in there is organized. And I kind of took to that at a very early age and very early stage of my career. And one of the things I realized that as I began to advance in my career is that organizing myself can really help in times of extreme stress and when I have a lot of demands on my time. And organizing myself can look like a lot of different things. It can simply be taking information from different sources and consolidating that into one source. So I might have information in my email and a few files somewhere, and then I have some drawings or some sketches on my desk, taking all that information, consolidating that into one space so I have it all readily there. That helps me really kind of stay clear and really helps me process some of the stress and anxiety that comes from my responsibilities. And so I try to take time and invest my energy into organizing the work, organizing the information that I have available to me in my work. It's something that I find helps de-stress some of the issues that I'm grappling with. And in doing so, one of the things I try to organize the most is my time. So when I'm stressed and I'm feeling like I don't have enough time to do something, going into my calendar and kind of restructuring things and blocking things out even more and making sure that I'm leaving myself enough time to do the things that I need to do really helps me cope with that stress and that extra responsibility. And so as my career has evolved, I've become more and more dependent on having a very, very well-structured calendar. I've become absolutely dependent on it, and I tell my students and my colleagues who I work with, if it's not on my calendar, I don't know about it. And so whenever there's a meeting or something like that, I try to impress upon the people I'm working with how important it is that it makes it to my calendar in some way, shape, or form. And that gives me that chance to then look at what I'm doing during the day and see at the beginning of the day where I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to get there. It's only been very, very recently, in the last couple of months, that I've taken a new approach to the way I work. And the reason why is because the work that I have been doing up until now has been really focused on managing projects, managing my time, managing my energy, and allocating that to different areas and allocating that in different ways. More recently, I've begun to take a new approach to my work and to think more critically about how I'm using that time. And if I'm using time to manage a project, for example, to kind of dedicate space in my schedule just for those kinds of activities, and to dedicate a different space in my calendar to more creative activities, because that's a lot of what I've been doing in the last few years. And so every week now, what I'll do on Friday is actually look at the coming week's calendar, and I'll look at each item on that calendar, and I won't decide where to put it necessarily, or even whether it should go here or there, or maybe move it to a different day or anything like that. I have to decide what I'm not going to do that day. And so I really look, instead of thinking, what am I going to do that day? I think about the opposite of that. What am I not going to do that day? And what would the consequences of me not doing that be? And a lot of times there are no serious consequences. Maybe that meeting that I thought was really important ended up getting deprioritized, and so it could just be an email. Maybe my presence at a certain place isn't necessarily required. And so it's given me a chance to kind of take a step back from things that are not really essential for me to be doing. And it helps me create that space then for work that I need to do in terms of management, and in work that I need to do in terms of creation. And this has brought me from a very constrained way of working, where I have every day kind of blocked out and I have every day more or less managed, to a way of working that allows for a lot more freedom in terms of my interests, in terms of my motivations, and allows me to take advantage of those feelings of inspiration when they strike. So rather than having everything so hyper structured, where I get that kind of oppressive feeling of these are the things I have to do, I get a sense of what do I want to do? And there's a lot of privilege that comes with being at this space in my career where I can make those kinds of decisions. But I do think that there's opportunities for us, no matter where we are in our career, to take that step back and to think more critically, is my presence essential in this space? And how can I craft a place in my calendar where I can follow my motivations? So my takeaway here is this. If you have to cope with a lot of responsibilities, organizing your time can really help you process that stress. And I think that's a really, really important way of approaching your work if you have multiple responsibilities. But there's a tipping point where you become kind of hyper organized and you're so bound to your schedule that you don't have that feeling of exploration. And so I think it's important that we take that step back and think about how we can create space that enables us to follow our ambitions and follow our motivations wherever they might go. And my call to action is exactly this. Put 30 minutes block on your calendar on every Friday that just prompts you to review the next week's calendar, the next week's responsibilities, and to think critically about what would happen if you did the opposite of whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing at that time. So look at your calendar, say, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. Think about what the opposite of that would be, and then think about what would happen if that's what you did. Sometimes it'll be the world will come to an end, and that means you just need to absolutely do whatever that is. But in other times, it may be that actually doing the opposite is going to get you where you want to go a lot more effectively.